Welcome to the Medical Collective, your go-to podcast where medicine meets real life. I'm Dr. Keisha Davis, a pathologist, personal trainer, and your host. I will be joined by a vibrant team of doctors who are not just healthcare professionals, but artists, fitness enthusiasts, and advocates for change. Each episode, we dive deep into the world of medicine, from untold stories of the healthcare industry to the latest in medical advancements. We're here to bring your insights, answer your burning questions, and explore the art and science of healing. So let's get started and step into the world of the Medical Collective. I am excited. We are streaming on multiple platforms today. Welcome to the Medical Collective, everybody. I am Dr. Keisha Davis, your host, and I have my amazing co-host and a special guest that you will meet in a minute. We have a lot to talk about, but we're going to get started with a couple of updates. Dr. Sharon, Dr. Atoosa, how are you two?
Doing well. Thank you. It's great to be back with the Medical Collective.
Yes, it is. It's been a minute. We took a hiatus, everybody, since Christmas. This is our 10th episode now for the new year. Dr. Sharon, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. Well, there's a lot going on, and we know that. We will address it. But today, this month is Black History Month, so we're going to be celebrating that. But before then, there's been a little bit of updates we need to talk about. And hi to our Facebook audience. You guys can chime in if you have anything. If you have questions, put them in a chat. You too, do the same. And share. Okay, first and foremost, we've been talking about the bird flu or avian influenza. So the most newest update is that there is a strain, the strain that was in the flocks of birds and the strain that caused the sickness in the individual in Canada that got very sick, and then the individual in Louisiana that passed away. That strain now is in dairy cattle. So the USDA has been ramping up testing, and they found now that there is several herds that are infected by the strain that's more serious. So we've got to be looking out for that. I know that we're having suppression of information, but we've got you, Dr. Sharon, we've got Dr. Atoosa and other doctors that are trying to share it. But be aware that there is now this strain that's infecting the dairy cattle that can be more serious. Any thoughts?
Yeah. One thing is that because of the suppression of the information, a lot of the recall data is not being shared. So previously when FDA would recall contaminated foods that have been contaminated with bird flu or with other contaminants, there would be a nationwide press release and it would be carried by media. But now that is not happening. So people really do need to follow physicians online and health communicators who are communicating public health information who have a direct line to these FDA announcements, which don't get publicized anymore. And also they hear from local health departments where there's communication and they can get the word out. So with bird flu outbreaks and with the tuberculosis outbreak happening in Kansas and with other communicable diseases, it's important that you tune into your other lines of communication. So before we were really relying on the CDC and the FDA to blast these announcements, and now we can't rely on that because of things breaking down from a government communication perspective coming from the top down. So it's very important to follow us on social media and follow reliable sources of information on social media to get the word out.
Great point. Dr. Sharon, any thoughts?
I definitely agree with what Dr. Atoosa says. I will actually add that there may also be information suppression in certain states. So it's actually imperative that you find physician online sources as physician educators online, or even some of the governing bodies, such as for me is American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, whether it's for you, Dr. Atoosa, is pediatrics, American College of Pediatrics. So those governing bodies that will have patient information sections also would be able to, provide you with information, because there will be information suppression also depending on what state you live in.
Very,
unfortunately.
Yeah. And in the show notes, we're going to put some links to ways that you can stay informed, some links to some important sources. So we'll do that. One more thing before we get to our special guest is those who like to cruise. I have not yet cruised, I have to be honest. Dr. Sharon, I think you're a cruiser, but we mentioned you're not?
Not really. So it's not my favorite or choice of vacationing. I have been on a few cruises, and if I had to choose, there'll be like a few cruises that I would go on, like maybe a Mediterranean or something like that. So I'm not like a big person who's just going to be cruising, every year. So yeah, because those close quarters and spreading of communicable diseases just kind of freak me out.
And that's what I have to share. So we talked about the princess before, I think, Christmas, the princess, Royal Princess, and now the Royal Caribbean. 180 passengers are sick. 180 passengers have a gastrointestinal illness, most likely norovirus, though let's be clear, the majority of cruises do not get these outbreaks. But norovirus is so important, and Dr. Sharon, I'm sure, and Dr. Atoosa, I'm sure you can share that the most important thing to do is to wash these hands with water and soap.
And soap.
Not just sanitizer.
And singing the alphabet so you actually know you're...
For 20 seconds.
Yeah, you're getting through
20 seconds of scrubbing. Yeah.
Yeah,
and to dry the hands.
Not the little bit, not the 5-second rinse, yes.
And then to dry them with, disposable paper towels so that you're not communicating, using the same towel as anyone else. And then also keeping the hands moisturized is important. So after you wash your hands, you use lotion from a trusted source that isn't contaminated because clean, dry, moisturized hands have the best chance of staying clean and not communicating pathogens. And of course, don't share food on cruises. That can communicate things, the same virus between families. And although it's very containous. And
But how do you not share food? Because that's what happens on a cruise, right? The food is laid out.
Dr. Sharon.
In a buffet style, and you're not just sharing it with your family, you're sharing it with everyone else.
Well, hopefully you wouldn't be contaminating the
I don't like to share my food.
Yeah, it's difficult, but if someone in the family has it, sharing food with that person is a surefire way of getting it. And if also sharing drinks, sharing food, and then in addition to hand washing, the other thing that you can do is quarantine. So if a person is having vomiting, diarrhea, and is, shedding virus, that is the time for them to not walk about the ship or walk about their house.
Just quarantine on a cruise ship. Okay, so that's real easy to do.
It's a tough order to stay in your stateroom, but if you're sick, you shouldn't be walking about the ship. So that's the other thing you can do. But it is hard. And I've also seen norovirus in populations that are not aboard ship. So I've actually seen it tear through families and schools as well. So if it gets out into the wild, it's also highly communicable. It's just that on a cruise ship, there's nowhere to go and you can't quarantine as easily as Dr. Keisha is just pointing out.
True. All right, so stay abreast on that. Even though the CDC is not able to release a lot of information on their website, they are investigating this as well as other outbreaks to find out what the source is. So stay tuned to us. Now, I am so excited. It has been probably 2 years, and we had this conversation on an app called Clubhouse with this amazing individual that I was listening to the conversation again last night, and it touched my heart. First of all, I'm a pathologist, so the fact that this individual's father is the father of bloodbanking, I'm like, yay, pathology, amazing contributions to medicine still to this day. But she is amazing in her own right, and she agreed to come here today. So today we are introducing Sylvia Drew, Esquire, and her father is Dr. Charles Drew. He is the father of blood banking. We will put some sources so that you can find out more and read about him in depth. But we're going to go a little way. Instead of just giving the basics, we're going to talk about the experiences she had with her father, what she's been doing so far, and the medical university that's in his name as well. So just to state, before we get to Dr. Esquire, Sylvia Drew, I wanted to say that Dr. Charles Drew is the father of blood banking because in a time during World War II, he was called upon to help separate this blood into plasma, into the different parts, to be able to also give it to the troops that were needed, the soldiers during that time. But he did something that people were not doing. He had blood mobiles, he started blood plasma centers, and then he was able to maintain the blood for longer than it's supposed to be before that time. It's not this picture perfect story that everybody thinks, which is the part that we need to know. It wasn't that he got all the accolades that he deserved. It wasn't that his blood or blood was not separated, as we'll learn. But it's the truth. And he continued on, and he has a legacy to this day, despite many obstacles. So we're going to learn about that, and I'm going to introduce Sylvia Drew, Esquire. Welcome, Sylvia. How are you doing? We are great. We're so happy to have you. A little hiccups, but we're here. We'd love to hear you introduce a little bit about yourself, maybe, to start.
Well, I am the third of 4 children Charles Drew had with my mom, Lenore Drew, and they met and were engaged in 3 days. So it was a whirlwind romance. And they proceeded right away to have these 4 children. And he was working at Freedman's Hospital in Washington, D.C., and teaching future surgeons. So I am now working at Charles Drew University, and the first president of the university was one of my father's students, Mitchell Spellman. And Mitchell was a great president, founding president for the university, and we grew out of the Watts Revolt in the 60s because people didn't have access to health care, and they didn't have access to healthcare providers who cared about them, and some of whom looked like them. So we've been growing those providers, and we grow doctors and nurses and public health specialists, and it's a wonderful enterprise. And we appreciate the fact that we were community founded. We've always had community leaders on our board, and we try to stay connected with them to guide what the community needs, because the point of our endeavor is to train people to serve minority and low-income communities. That's what we do.
And it's really a testament to what your father was and what he taught you, to be honest, because I remember from the last conversation, for those don't know, we know he's the father of blood banking, but he was also a great teacher. He was teaching residents at the university at the time, and you said he almost had like a parenting relationship with his residents, and so they had this trust, and I think that can be lost, actually. So he taught you a lot about things beyond the fact that he created and invented many things that are helping us to this day, but he taught you values.
Yeah, I'm so proud of the fact that his students went on to head departments of surgery in hospitals throughout the South. So it was like planting flowers, except it was surgeons. And they flourished, and there was something, he was very interested in sports, He ran track, he played football, he missed going to the Olympics by the flip of a coin because he tied with somebody. And so he sort of taught medicine in the same way that a coach would teach his athletes. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this, because it's hard. And when you're doing it and you don't have enough money and you don't have assurance that you're going to have a place to go when you get out because you're African American, it's just it's a big gamble. But they did it with great relish, and when they would go to see him, and the next one would be waiting to see him, the one waiting would say, "Did you get the elixir? Did you get the elixir?" Because he had just a way of encouraging them in an excited way about what they were doing and what they could do going forward. And it was so wonderful for me that I was working with Mitchell Spellman, one of his students, who was a wonderful leader of the effort to grow a university to train healthcare providers for the future.
Dr. Sharon, Dr. Atoosa, anything? And Dr. Sharon is a surgeon. A surgeon at heart, and she tells her story about how she really was thinking about just being a general surgeon or maybe plastics. But, I think she can relate to a lot of that in the training. Did you have trainers that were similar to that, Dr. Sharon?
Yes, I did. Just as a resident, and especially an African-American female resident, it's actually really imperative for you to have good mentors as a trainee. And in my program, my mentor, I remember, I still communicate with him, is Dr. Tolles and Dr. Alan Tolles at Long Island Jewish Hospital, which is down Northwell, where I trained, and he was just always such a good support. He always told me what I needed to do. Always called me out if I didn't do something I was supposed to do, because that's important, right?
Yes.
And just provided that leadership, and there were others too. There were others, African-American attendings. I remember Dr. Deans, Dr. Bell also, who were all so paramount in teaching us, and people who look like us. And the thing is too, is that you actually have to be better and perform better than people who don't look like you, right? I mean, that it is what it is. And especially even in the surgical specialties, like I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, but even in surgical specialties like OBs, even general surgery, some other subspecialty of surgery, trauma, plastics, ortho, for me, I just feel like Black women are held, and Black people on a whole, are just held to a higher standard. But most often we exceed that standard that's set for us, because we don't have a choice. We really don't have a choice, right? So we got to rise to the occasion and show out, and that's how it's been. But for me, just to be able to sit here and talk to Miss Sylvia it warms my heart, because as an obstetrician, one of the things with taking care of someone in labor, someone who's delivered, you can literally lose your entire blood volume in less than 15 minutes, and you can lose that person. So just to have the ability to transfuse someone and take care of them and send them home to their families. And I always tell my patient that. I said, my goal is to send you home with this one little extra person right here. That's the thing. But it's true. That is my ultimate goal, to get you home, to reduce your risk. And we just know, because for me, always in the back of my head is always the risk of hemorrhaging. It's always, we know what the risk factors are, but sometimes you're surprised by someone who, quote unquote, don't have the risk factors, but just pregnancy in itself is a risk factor. So I am one person who truly appreciate blood banking and what it does to save women or a pregnant person, and to reduce maternal mortality. So thank you. And thank you, Dad. We appreciate his groundbreaking contribution to medicine.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, Dr. Sharon. And I also wanted to echo not only what Dr. Sharon said, but say that I've always admired Dr. Drew since I first learned about him in elementary school, because he not only overcame all of these obstacles to be able to achieve what he did, but that he had the singular vision. And he knew, he saw before it was before it even happened, how it would transform our capacity to save lives and the capacity for healthcare in the field. And he had a vision because it was wartime, and he was trying to figure out how to save the lives of soldiers, but also he knew that it wasn't just about war, and that it would transform medicine as we knew it. And people don't realize that we've gone through, as a public health historian, I've seen that we've gone through these eras of modern medicine even, right? So even in the past couple of 100 years, we've gone through these eras and shifts, total paradigm shifts of how we can practice medicine. And Dr. Sharon highlighted the difference in obstetrical care. You can look at the difference in obstetrical care, like when OB-GYN started to wash their hands in the mid-1800s, what a dramatic difference it made to wash their hands, right? So that postpartum fevers didn't kill women, in their childbed. And then there was this whole other shift when blood became available, of maternal mortality declining because we could save the lives of these hemorrhaging mothers. But also it saved the lives of so many people, cancer patients, anyone else undergoing an operation, so many situations in which trauma victims would come in and die from loss of blood because all we had to give them was fluids. So I've always admired, and I knew early on that I wanted to be a doctor. So when I read the story of the development of blood banking, I think I was in the second grade, and it was in a history book for children that I found in the library, and I have always admired him. So meeting Sylvia a few years ago through our Clubhouse highlight of Dr. Drew, and getting to see not only the portrait of the person, not just the scientist, but the person, was really meaningful to me. But also the idea that the passion and the curiosity with which Dr. Drew practiced is now being taught to generations of medical students was really uplifting thing to find out. So I appreciate that she's here with us, and that we get to see his legacy in action.
A little bit of the history that we talked about last time that people may not know was that Dr. Charles Drew, Sylvia Drew's father, had set up this blood collection center. So he was actually doing research at the time, and he was called upon for the Blood Britain Project. So he was called upon because during the war, and this is World War II, there was a unit that they were storing blood at over there, and they had to abandon it, right? So then they're like, oh no, we need some way to get plasma and to get blood products for the soldiers. So literally, while he was working on his doctorate, Dr. Drew knew that he had to collect the blood in large quantities. So he had gotten the blood mobile together. That's where you could collect the blood, and it was refrigerated, and then also be able to store. Oh, that's okay. And then also be able to, I notice if I mute and then unmute, then it'll reset that background. But they also, he developed blood centers. So there were collection centers as well to be able to store these products. Now listen, blood products don't last for long. And to me, it's really a science to be able to figure out, okay, with platelets, with the plasma, with the red blood cells, how to store that accurately and be safe. Because what could happen if the blood product is not good, right? The person can actually succumb to that infection or whatever have you because of the blood product. In addition to that, he also knew that you have to make sure that the blood product matches as close as possible to the person that's receiving it, right? So you don't have a reaction. And Sylvia, we were just talking about your father during the World War and how it came to be that he did all these marvelous things. But a little bit people don't know is what happened, that kind of some of the difficulties that he encountered and what happened to where he, had to leave the Red Cross as well. Because one thing you did say about your father, he was about the science and the work. He wasn't necessarily, trying to be, though he was a revolutionary, but he wasn't really trying to fight any unnecessary battles, should I say. Hello, listeners. We want to remind you that you can catch The Medical Collective on all your favorite podcast platforms. That includes Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We're also on Libsyn, and you can find us on all social media platforms as The Medical Collective. Do you have thoughts or questions? Please don't hesitate to reach out. We love hearing from you. Now let's get back to the conversation. If you could tell us a little bit more that we may not know about that time and how he ended up being with the Red Cross and then leaving.
The work that my father did preceded World War II breaking out, I believe. And so that was independent of what happened with the war, and then we needed blood for our soldiers and our allies in the European theater. And he was called on by the Red Cross. They initially did not want to accept contributions. My father put together a mobile truck to go out into Harlem to collect blood. And the Red Cross didn't want him to collect blood from the Black community. And he said that he would not help them if he was required to just collect blood from other groups. So they yielded. And that was a major victory that only happened because of war. I think if it had not been for the war, they would have stood their ground, but they needed the blood. They needed his work. So, the war was good to our history from that perspective. But he was not a person who spent a lot of time worrying about the ignorance of prejudice. He really preferred to just invest in his research and invest in his patient care. My mother said that he would take care of the oldest, poorest, sickest person on the ward like she was his mother. He just loved taking care of people. He loved medicine. He loved the science of blood collection and preservation because it proved that we're all the same. We have different blood types, but we all have those blood types. And it was proof, scientific proof that all the ugliness of racism was a lie. It's just a lie. And that was his political contribution, I think. Although he was friends with some of the great political leaders of the day, but he wasn't out there marching with them. Although he did go down to the Washington Monument to hear Marian Anderson sing. You remember she was denied the opportunity to sing at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., and so it was arranged that she would sing at the Lincoln Memorial. And he went down to hear that. And so I thought a lot about that when I went to the March on Washington in 1963, which was a huge, huge gathering of people of concern, minorities and others. And there we were in the same place that he was standing when Marian Anderson sang. So that's a treasured memory that I have.
I have a question about what you were talking about. As a child growing up, a young Black woman, seeing your father's work change the world, How did that impact you and your decision to pursue the law? And also, can you speak a little about what it was like to be, in that science-infused household?
Oh, I don't know whether I'm a good witness for that part. My major delight was we lived right across the street from Freedman's Hospital on Howard University campus. And when I was big enough, I was able to go walk a block to go to the hospital and go down to the basement to the snack bar and get sweet things to eat. So that was my major involvement in the hospital and what was going on. I was just a child, I was 6 when he died. So, but the fact that he was immersed in healthcare and immersed in the Black community's effort to take care of itself through medicine obviously was important in my environment. And I think it probably is the reason, although I was imbued with the energy of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and I was a civil rights lawyer for many years, I wanted to do civil rights in a healthcare context. And so one of the things that I worked with local attorneys in the South on was, getting the local hospitals to give Black physicians privileges because they didn't want to give us privileges at those hospitals. And so we sued them, and we got privileges for physicians in hospitals that previously wouldn't let us in. So I kind of took his health focus into the arena of advocacy and healthcare, and trying to make it possible for people who were the outsiders, whether they were Black or brown or poor, to have access to what we knew. Why should what we know be reserved only for the moneyed class?
Something that we need to talk about and that we all can comment on, especially listening to her before, and this is our second time listening to her. I will put the recording in the show notes from the Clubhouse conversation. But something that we learned from Sylvia Drew that I think is a lot is that we're continuing. The work is never done. And she had said this in her last discussion with hers, and I think she might be coming on, but she had said that the work is never done. And one of the things that as a doctor, for those that don't know, unfortunately, is that Dr. Charles Drew was in a car accident. And during that car accident, it was him and 3 other physicians, and they were all too tired to drive, after working. I'm sure you can relate, Dr. Sharon. After working a full shift, they were too tired to drive. And her father said, that's okay, I'll drive. And still continued to drive. And in that conversation, Sylvia Drew told us, she's like, you're not superheroes. And I think that her father just kept going, and did not realize what his limit was and when to say no and to take rest. And I'm sure you can relate to that because I didn't know that story either. I did not know that he was tired and fatigued and fell asleep at the wheel because doing what we think we're destined to do, and that's all we're supposed to do. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, I think this goes back to, or basically surrounds a common thing around physicians, and especially I would say maybe Gen X and above, is that we didn't have the ability to say no. Right? We just didn't have the ability to say no. We said yes to things that we should never had. Now the newer physicians, no, they're not doing that, right? So I think a lot of times we say yes to things that we never should have. Yes to extra shift, yes to extra working extra long, yes to an extra committee, yes to extra this, extra that, all in helping people and helping patients, right? I know I've done it. So then you work more, right? You work extra when you really should have been home, with your family and your kids. Or you're delayed now, so then you're up until 11, 12 at night, closing charts and writing notes. So this extra things that we do basically makes you tired and lead to burnout. And I can see that happening. And I remember even when I was in training, when I was a resident, I think there was a pediatric resident who fell asleep behind the wheel. A colleague of mine, she used to pull over and sleep on the side of the road before she continued her journey home. Yes, right? And because we're up 24 hours, 24, it wasn't uncommon that 26, 28 hours later, you're still in the hospital doing stuff. And it's you couldn't say no. We didn't say no. Right? So, and I can see exactly how that mindset of not saying no, let me take care of this. No, I got to do this. No, let me help this. Let me do this. Contribute to him falling asleep behind the wheel. I see it. I absolutely see it. It's yeah.
That and Sylvia Drew had said that we need to put limits. And she learned from that, and she is instilling, I'm sure, in the students at the medical university, which is Charles Drew Medical University, everybody in California. She's instilling the fact that you need to put limits and that you're not a superhero. I think we learned that during the pandemic, right? And now we're seeing a generation that knows how to put limits on what they will and will not tolerate. So, Dr. Atoosa, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a lesson to all physicians who push their own limits in favor of saving others' lives or achieving the next milestone. And I think that now in the younger generations, even I see physicians unionizing, millennial and Gen Z physicians, I see them unionizing. And yes. Yes, and we were told we weren't allowed to for so long because they didn't want doctors to have that. And I feel like this idea that we put our own oxygen masks on first, and that we're allowed to be tired, and we're allowed to be sick, and we're allowed to need rest, and that doctors are human and we are not superhuman. I think that, again, manifested itself during the early days of the pandemic when doctors were asked to work beyond their limits, and many died and many took their own lives, and many died from not having PPE and being infected because they were working without protective equipment. So I think that it's gone on, and I wish I could say that that there is, it's completely gone, and that there's no culture like that. But when we saw in the early days of the pandemic that it was still here, right? Despite any residency hour restrictions or anything else that might have been put into effect legally before that, we saw that when there was a crisis, doctors were called upon to sacrifice their own health and well-being for that of others. So I think there's a long way to go, and I'm glad that there is a discussion in medical circles, medical training circles about this, and about how to recognize burnout, how to recognize fatigue, how to take your rest when you need it. And I commend Dr. Sharon's colleague for pulling over and sleeping rather than getting in a car accident, right? But, now, of course, there's ability, like you can take a lift home if you need to, so you don't have to drive yourself. But I think at that time when Dr. Drew and his colleagues were driving, I think they were driving actually to a medical conference. And that's when this all happened. There's ways to, nowadays, there's ways to actually bow out and say, this is unsafe, and I will not do this unsafe thing. And even when I was in corporate medicine and I felt that things were becoming unsafe, I could speak and I could say that without fear, without too much fear of retribution. And I was definitely working in a rural situation where I was one of 3 pediatricians. So we had 1 in 3 call. So it was really intense, and we took call for a week at a time. So it was very, very intense. But there were times where we could call on each other and just be like, listen, I've been up all night. I need to shift some patients onto your schedule. this morning, and I'll be in at 10 a.m. because I'm going to get 2 hours of sleep. So there were ways to do that. And I think that culture has changed enough that at least within our physician community, we can admit that we need rest and we need respite. And I think back then that wasn't even possible, like Dr. Sharon said. But here it's still convincing the outer community to take physicians' lives and physicians' well-being seriously. I think we have a long way to go still.
Well said. I think what I have taken away from these conversations, in addition to that, is that racism and inequities still exist. Even though we may focus on the fact that we're making these amazing contributions, Dr. Charles Drew did know when to say, okay, I'm withdrawing from the Red Cross, this is too much. But at the same time, we did realize that his legacy of what his accomplishments are is there, but the legacy as far as monetary gain or legacy for his family was not able to be established, right? And we see that a lot where I think we do all need to realize when we're doing inventions, we're doing our work, that we need to make sure that we're getting our just due for it, that we protect our work as well, make sure that we have the legal ramifications, that everything is protected, and that we continue to use our voice, because even we notice with information being silenced, people being silenced, scientists not being able to do what they're supposed to do, we still have to find ways to make sure that we do it for the people. And I think if Dr. Charles Drew was here today, he would tell us to continue on. Though some days we feel like we don't want to, I think we still need to continue on and keep that legacy going. Dr. Sharon, how about you?
I agree. I definitely do agree that we have to keep the legacy going. I know some things have changed. I'm not sure that they've changed enough, but I do know that this current generation of younger physicians, what are they, millenniums? Gen Zs?
They're Gen Zs. Millennials are already in their 30s and 40s. So
okay, yeah.
The ones that make up our Gen Z.
So the Gen Zs are not having it, right? So a lot of the change will come from the Gen Z and those who are coming behind of the Gen Z. I don't know how much that's going to help me today, but I mean, I've changed the way I practice anyway. So I'm no longer on that hamster wheel with like no exit, right? So I mean, I've had to make changes myself, but I know that generation, no is a full sentence and they use it.
No has an exclamation point.
Exclamation
multiple
point.
Exclamation points.
And it's I mean, there has to be a better way, a different way, and I think it really starts with expanding medical school classes and expanding residency programs. That's where it starts.
And I hope we can do that. For those that don't know, as you listened in, there is a university named after him, and it is the Charles Drew University. They have ways you can contribute, you can help, because now it has worked at being a full 4-year. Before, there was 2 years of didactic and 2 years of clinical. The didactic was done at Columbia University. Now they're going to be a whole 4-year program of Black and brown physicians and whoever else wants to go there. And I'm excited. They're having a luncheon at the end of February. If you go to Drew U, so like Charles C. Drew, and then U for university.edu, you can find out more about it. I also implore you to look a little bit more into Sylvia Drew, because she was a civil rights activist. She continued doing the fight to this day, which we're still having to do the fight with diversity, equity, inclusion, which really includes everybody into the conversation, is being hindered. And so I do implore you all to do your little bit of education and read. Whether that is Google reading, whether that is Google Chat reading, making sure that you're getting the correct sources, or an actual book. read up on Dr. Charles Drew and Sylvia Drew, because we will continue the conversation.
Yes, she's definitely carried on his legacy, and getting Black and brown doctors on medical staffs of hospitals increased representation and access to healthcare for so many, and improves outcomes. We know if you're a physician, if you're a Black and brown person and you have a Black or brown physician, you do better medically. We know that that's the case. And so she also fought the good fight, and not only during the civil rights movement, but for decades after. And we're so grateful for Dr. Charles Drew, for Sylvia Drew, his daughter, who did her work with as an attorney, and for the entire legacy of the Drew family in contributing to medicine and the advancement of Black and brown physicians.
Well said, Dr. Atoosa. Now, I know the climate right now is heavy. We will discuss more about the fact that there's been a freeze on release of information, medical information that's difficult for many of us to be able to do what we're supposed to do. We will talk about that in the next episode, so you have to come back for that. Again, please share and follow the Medical Collective, whether it's here on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, we're just about everywhere, LinkedIn. And then check out Dr. Sharon, Dr. Atoosa, myself, and Dr. Dan and Dr. Leslie, who are not here for this episode. And I want to thank Sylvia Drew so much for being here. I know that we've had some technical difficulties, but listen, that is life. I'm going to make sure some snippets, some recordings of that amazing Clubhouse conversation is included, as well as the link to that so you can listen to it. And we actually had a YouTube listener on here, as well as a Facebook listener. So thank you all, and until next time, bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Medical Collective. We hope today's episode has left you with valuable insights and a new perspective on healthcare. Don't forget, follow us on social media for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. I'm Dr. Keisha Davis, and it's been a pleasure to share this time with you. Stay healthy, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode, where medicine continues to meet real life. Please note that the content provided in the Medical Collective podcast, including text, graphics, images, and other material, is for informational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individual authors and guests and do not represent those of the Medical Collective, its staff, and any affiliated entities. The appearance of content on the podcast does not imply an endorsement. Neither the host, Dr. Keisha Davis, the co-host, or any guest of the podcast bear responsibility for the accuracy of the content provided or the use of information received through the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Medical Collective podcast, its employees, writers, or guests is solely at your own risk.